Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Armstrong. I'm the operating principal broker of Keller Williams Vermont, as well as Strong Will Property Management. We've got Angela Zakowski here, who I think is one of our best advocates for property rights, for landlord rights, and a great balance of providing great value to those who invest in real estate and provide housing, and fair and safe and reliable housing for those members of our community who rent. you know, we've got a gentleman here, Nicholas Martin from Burlington Telecom. And Angela, I think I mentioned this a little bit in the preamble. I was at the Vermont Association of Realtors conference the last couple of days, and they shared some national statistics that, yeah, I'm not able to quote, but we're going to be seeing more rental units come on in large parts of the country than we've seen in years past, to the point our vacancy rates are going to increase. Now, I think it was Allen and Brooks, the report that came out earlier this year, talked about some 600 or so units coming on in the greater Burlington area in the next couple of years, which will probably bring our vacancy rate from one, I'm going to guess, to up towards 3%. Still extremely healthy. But when I hear of stuff like that, I think of the Wayne Gretzky quote, it's not about being where the puck is, it's about being where the puck's going.
Yeah.
And I think about what can we do as landlords to improve the quality of our units, which will help retain tenants, allow us to bring our rents up equitably and fairly, but to market, and then also create the environment that people aren't going to leave because they've got a great building, be it tile, or in this case, some excellent telecom services for some very affordable rates.
Right. And I think, Brian, you sort of hit that spot on, is this is one of these areas that many housing providers may not even be thinking about, and may not even be aware that there are options available to them, that it makes their units potentially more marketable. And as we see a lot of our workforce shifting from in person to remote work, this type of infrastructure in your building is going to become more and more critical to making you competitive in the market. So I think with that, I am going to turn the floor over to Nicholas Martin, who is the Director of Business Development for Burlington Telecom. So he works with commercial accounts, which most landlords would be considered a commercial account. And so he's going to not be here to sell people on Burlington Telecom, but to more walk them through why fiber optic internet is going to be such an advantage to a building and why people should consider that, whether they use Burlington Telecom or whether they use another service provider. So,
Great.
Nicholas, we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Angela. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so I think you both hit the nail on the head very well. I've been with the company for about 15 years, and really for the last 5 years, since our organization has started expanding infrastructure, the real big gap that we've noticed is getting outside the walls of Burlington and educating developers, property managers, architects, and investors on the benefits of fiber, and not just the benefits of fiber, but more importantly, setting up their properties and future proofing them for not just the infrastructure that's there today, but what's going to be coming tomorrow. High level, basically, what we're going to review today, just an introduction to the growing demand that we're seeing. Brian touched on it a little bit just a moment ago for high-speed connectivity. Why property owners and landlords should consider fiber installations for their investment properties. Then we're going to touch on a few of the types of deployments as well as options that investors have when they're laying new fiber for new construction, as well as what can they do to retrofit those existing buildings that are there today. And then lastly, what we'll talk about is how developers and property owners can leverage partnerships with internet service providers like BT and others to maximize the property benefits. All right, so the first thing I want to do is just kind of take you through kind of what they consider the telecom boom. I'm going to spare you from all 17 minutes of this video, and we're going to hit the high points of it because I do think it's important to set the stage. And a lot of it touches on what Brian was talking about earlier, but really kind of that growing need for telecommunications.
It's everyone from everywhere in the world, and we're all just out there running together. It's what the city should be. It's what the
It may not look like much, but the amount of information that can be transmitted through a strand of fiber the size of a human hair is astounding.
Fundamentally, in like one fiber pair, half of the humans on Earth could be talking to the other half simultaneously. That's how much capacity is there. And so it's so much more capable than all the other alternatives that it's hard to even compare.
Fiber-based networks make up the majority of the internet's backbone. Fiber optic subsea cables spanning thousands of miles connect continents together, exchanging data at nearly the speed of light. Meanwhile, the massive data centers that host all of our cloud-based applications also rely on fiber connections. Increasingly, fiber connections are making their way directly into people's homes, providing them with fast, reliable internet.
Fiber is future-proof, yes, and it's probably the best broadband technology in most cases.
To understand the technology behind fiber optic internet and how the market for fiber products is changing, CNBC visited Corning's optical fiber and cable manufacturing facilities in North Carolina. Most famous as the maker of Gorilla Glass for iPhones, Corning is also the world's largest producer of optical fiber by manufacturing capacity and market share, as well as the largest manufacturer of fiber cable in North America.
We have fibers that were installed at the very beginning of our industry, almost 50 years ago. They're still running today. Usually, the lifetime of a system is not the fiber itself, it's the electronics at the end. So the lasers that are transmitting the light or the amplifiers, those are the ones that will fail well before the glass will fail.
From the time that we've invented fiber until now, there's basically been about 6 billion kilometers of fiber manufactured and installed around the world, roughly. To put that in perspective, that is enough fiber to go back and forth to the sun 20 times.
But only 43% of U.S. households have access to a fiber internet connection.
In some instances, particularly in rural areas and very challenging geographies, it can be prohibitively expensive to deploy fiber, and it can be very expensive for households to pay for it.
The bipartisan infrastructure law that passed in November 2021 promises to bridge this digital divide, with $65 billion dedicated to expanding access to broadband internet to all Americans. Such government support, along with a number of other factors, have caused a spike in demand for fiber products.
All right, so, what's our new normal, post-pandemic, right? So the global pandemic definitely demonstrated that high-speed broadband was really no longer a luxury for us. It was really a necessity, for every home, business, anchor institution, and as a result, the Biden administration made the deployment of fiber infrastructure a national priority. And by the end of 2022, there was roughly 63 million homes with access to fiber, which meant that they were nearly halfway to achieving the president's objective of getting fiber to every American home by 2030. Now, that bipartisan infrastructure law included about $42 billion of infrastructure funding being administered through a deployment program. And that federal program prioritized fiber projects. In 2023, President Biden announced that there was going to be state-by-state funding allocations. And we anticipate there's as much fiber being deployed in the next 5 years as there has been deployed throughout the entire history. Now, consumer research has studied, the studies demonstrate that there's a preference by fiber to consumer across every measurable category. Consumers, want fiber to be able to work from home, have better healthcare, education, safety, and then in addition to this, higher property values property owners are also benefiting from this as well. And then fiber operators like Burlington Telecom and other fiber providers also see higher net promoter scores, and market share increases, making it easier to sell when we're investing in fiber deployment programs. Now, one of the most interesting outcomes when we started deploying this and researching this was the value of fiber optics in homes and multi-dwelling units we purchase or rent. And that trend is continuing each and every year, and we expect that trend to continue as more homes become available to the consumers. Now, high level, let's just look at the numbers. So in 2023, the number of homes in the US with access to fiber to the home increased by 13% from the previous year to 78 million homes. Now, the Fiber Broadband Association projects that another 12 million homes is going to be deployed with fiber by the end of 2024. And in June of 2023, the FC Broadband Data Map estimated that 46% of locations throughout the U.S. were serviceable by fiber with an average take rate of just under 50%. Now, the demand for fiber is obviously driven by many things, right? The pandemic, the need for fast, secure, reliable data transmission, cloud computing, generative AI, and video conferencing. But the biggest thing we're seeing is the Internet of Things in people's homes. So we have to ask ourselves, why should a property owner or a landlord consider a fiber installation in their home versus what they already have today with DSL or cable? So the biggest thing is just keeping up with consumer demand, right? Internet of Things. So in 2019, the average home had about 8.5 devices connected in their home to internet connectivity. And they're projecting that's almost going to double by 2025, right? So laying infrastructure, keeping up with that growing demand has really been no easy task. But buildings fed with fiber today are not only going to be able to keep up with consumer demands today, but also future-proofing those properties for tomorrow. And there was recent studies that were done for single-family homes and the amenities they most desired. Now, the number 2 on that list was very high speed and reliable internet. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, number 5 on that list was also good home connect Wi-Fi. Now, in addition to this, we've also done the same research for multi-dwelling units for our property owners. The same results, right? Washer and dryer leads the top of the list, but high-speed broadband is right there with it. So the real value proposition for the fiber for property owners is that fiber to the home infrastructure is shown to bring higher rents and higher property values by as much as 11% to net income and for MDU owners and operators. Now, tenants also report a greater overall satisfaction with their property with homes fed by fiber, and that's just leading to increased demand. So fiber is typically delivered to the home in a few different ways, right? The most common is the aerial drop, which would be the aerial line that comes to your home and then to the side of the building. If you don't have pole lines in your neighborhood or development, that would then come via underground. Now, with most homes being built pre-2010, the internal wiring that many people have in their homes only complement deployment technologies for coax or DSL technologies. And rarely are we seeing homes overhauled with Cat6 or Ethernet wiring unless it's a newer build. Now, until recent years, this meant that fiber optic providers, when they got to the side of the home, they would need to rewire and bring wiring all the way to the router along baseboards, not wall fishing, right? So unsightly wiring, just to be able to provide you with symmetrical speeds. We are now, in the last 10 or 15 years, the technology has advanced quite a bit, where some pretty cool things are happening. So there's a technology called MoCA, and MoCA stands for Multimedia over Coax Alliance. Now, this technology uses the existing coax cables that are already in almost everybody's home today and in their multi-dwelling units. And in Essex, this MoCA allows them to have a wired internet home network without the headache of drilling holes or running wires. Now, because MoCA technology is wired, it also delivers a very low lag and ultra high speeds. And the best part is it provides symmetrical internet connections.
Hey, Nick, just to stop you for a second, can you describe for folks what symmetrical internet is? Because people may not know that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Angela. I live in this world, so oftentimes I need to remind myself to take a step back. So sure. So most people, when they're working with a DSL or a coax provider, and they do a speed test, you'll notice your download speed is always way higher than your upload speed. That is a non-symmetrical connection. And for years, that wasn't a really big problem until the pandemic hit. And everybody was working from home and doing video conferencing, right? We saw video conferencing skyrocket. And so what symmetrical broadband is that fiber providers offer, it is an equal distribution of both high download and high upload speed. And that allows you to do more things in your home or in your office simultaneously without draining the available upload bandwidth that you have. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. So the great part is that this same coax wiring that DSL and coax providers are providing over and giving you non-symmetrical speeds, with this new MoCA technology, fiber providers can leverage this technology and give you symmetrical speeds over this wiring.
Okay. And again, just to sort of jump in, so DSL is the internet that comes through your phone line. There's still plenty of that around in Vermont. And coax is what we would think of as our typical sort of cable internet that's, run through sort of some bigger name companies, but that comes sort of as a package with your cable and your internet and your phone if you still have a landline phone.
Correct. Yeah. So DSL really came on board first. It was when you think of dial-up internet, right? The AOL CDs from back in the day. That was really what DSL was. And unfortunately, there is still quite a few places throughout the US and even in Vermont where DSL is prevalent. Coax came on the scene next. It offered very high download speeds, which was excellent. Not many people were uploading things to the internet at that time. But as technology advanced, and especially with the pandemic hit, we noticed this drastic need for upload technology, specifically because many people are doing what we're doing today. They're on video calls, they're uploading their feed to the internet, and then obviously fiber internet gives you the ability to do that symmetrically.
And you may cover this in a little bit. So a couple years ago, and I'm on cable, I put in an Eros mesh system, so I got great, coverage throughout my entire house, about 2,800 square foot house. If I decide to invest in my properties, am I going to have to buy additional technology? Is there MoCA units that you have to buy to, pun intended, mesh with current mesh systems or other routers?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. So, the great part is that most of the internet providers are actually leveraging that technology and using it. So it wouldn't be something that the homeowner would necessarily have to leverage. So once you get access to a fiber optic provider, they would then bring the technology to the side of your home, leverage these MoCA adapters, and then be able to leverage the wiring in your home. Now, keep in mind, though, the only challenge with copper wiring and coax wiring is that over time it degrades. So this is a perfect scenario where they actually need to test the wiring infrastructure in your home to make sure that it is sufficient. Copper over time degrades, right? In Vermont, we have inclement weather, and year over year, that copper tends to degrade. And when it degrades, eventually you start to have attenuation on the line and you start getting low signal. So, eventually, yes, that wiring will need to be replaced. The great part is this is very much a stopgap, though, for customers that are in a home that was not a new build. They only have coax wiring, and they don't like the idea of having to run wiring throughout and rewiring their home with Ethernet. This gives them the ability to get up to 1 gig symmetrical over that wiring by leveraging that technology. Now, it doesn't necessarily future-proof your property, but it definitely keeps you relevant in today's market. All right, so anyone designing a new apartment building, a multi-dwelling unit, is ultimately going to need to consider how they wire their building. So the first thing I want to talk about is new construction, right? So many leave this wiring decision up to that developer as they sub that out to a local contractor. Now, the challenge with this is that most electricians and developers are using the same data wiring deployment styles as they have been over the last 15 years, right? And therefore, they're not wiring the building with the future in mind. That meets not only the needs of today, but most importantly, needs of tomorrow. Now, the standard method that people use, and they've been using this for years, is to have their providers pull their services from the street into the building's basement and into their telecom closet. Now, that closet could be one closet, it could be a stacked closet, but at this point, those telecom providers would likely tie into a phone closet, into the internal, what we call house wiring. The house wiring is going to be the wiring, the Ethernet, the coax, whatever's been ran throughout that building from the phone closet to the units as well as throughout the unit. Now, this means that, by using this method, the building owner is responsible for providing all of that house wiring. Now, given the distance of the coax of the Ethernet from the telecom closet to the unit, the maximum available throughput that they're ever going to get out of that wiring is 1 gig. Now, 1 gig sounds like a lot. 10 years ago, very few people were using 1 gig. Today, it's the most common package that people use. 5-10 years from now, 1 gig is going to be, there's going to be 2 gigs, 5 gigs, 10 gigs to the home. And with that technology, you're going to be maxed out with that wiring. Now, over the last 10 years, organizations like BT have really been focused on trying to educate developers on proper data wiring techniques to not just keep you relevant today, but more importantly, future-proof your property. Now, with recent developments over the last 5 years, the entire state is eventually going to have fiber as an option from somebody, whether it be BT or other fiber providers. And those buildings not designed are obviously going to be faced with an expensive overhaul down the road. So the alternative way that you would be looking to wire your building is actually less expensive for the investor or property owner because it puts the onus on the telecom provider. So the new way that we are having providers design buildings is bringing the telecom services from their main hub into the building and making the telecom provider bring it all the way to the unit. Now, by doing this, they would then connect into what's called a media box. Now, this is the standard, whether it's a fiber provider or a coax provider or both. Whatever telecom providers are in your area, the expectation was they would be bringing it all the way to the unit. Now, once in the unit, they connect to something called a media box, which is often placed in a linen or broom closet. Now, once in the unit, these providers then tie into house wiring. And the great part is the only house wiring that you need is within the unit. And the advantage to doing this is you get up to 10 gig speeds by doing this. This is the new wiring design method. And this keeps that building relevant for the next 10 or 20 years. And the great part is it costs the developer or investor less money in wiring because they're paying the electricians less, they're paying the developer less because there's a lot less wiring that they have to be responsible for. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about existing buildings, right? Because these are a little bit more of a challenge. Now, the main method right now that most people are doing is the telecom providers are coming into the closet, they're tying into the house wiring. Now, they can leverage that MoCA technology. The MoCA technology is going to be able to give you up to 1 gig. The challenge with these buildings is that unless you're going to overhaul that wiring, there really is no quick and easy fix for you to be able to solve an existing building. However, the fact that MoCA is available, it means without any cost right now, anyone, as long as they have a fiber provider that is coming to their building and the coax technology is good, they can now get up to 1 gig speeds when currently they probably aren't able to. So there is a little bit of hope in the short term.
So Nick, that would just mean that fiber coming to the building is a provider running that fiber internet cable to the exterior of the building or into that technology closet, and then they use the existing coax cable to service it out to the apartments. Exactly,
or Ethernet. Now, there is another option. The other option is obviously, in some cases, you can actually sign an agreement with a telecom provider. So oftentimes, people are faced with these large, expensive overhauls. They know they need to keep their building relevant. They have a provider that wants to come in and serve them. Let's say it is a new fiber provider to the area. As that owner, you can leverage the value that you have in your building. If you have 20 units, 30 units, that telecom provider is going to want to be able to sell to those. So oftentimes you can negotiate a rewire of your building at zero cost in exchange for allowing them to be able to utilize that wiring to serve tenants. So that's a lot of times what we're actually educating property owners and developers on when they're faced with these big overhauls. As that new fiber provider comes into your community, start that conversation with them and negotiate a deal. And oftentimes these deals are 10 years where they'll say, okay, well, if you're going to run the wiring as the telecom provider, since you fronted that cost, you get exclusive access to that wiring specifically. So it's not saying that other providers can't serve your building. It just means that they can't use that wiring because that telecom provider provided it. And so oftentimes providers will do this no problem, because now they're guaranteed revenue for the next 10 years. So it's just one way that can help developers in situations like this. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about leveraging, bulk partnerships with ISPs. And so, bulk deals of yesterday kind of got a bad rap, because the bulk deals of yesterday were cable agreements, and they were always heavily sided towards the provider. Basically, property owners knew they wanted to be able to offer a bulk service. The bulk service agreements in the fine print were all upside, basically saying it doesn't matter if someone's in the unit or not. If you have 80 units, we're charging you for 80 units, and every year the price keeps going up. Well, since internet bulk deals came on the scene, it has changed quite a bit. It has shifted. It is a much more balanced approach. And I just want to talk about some of the benefits of bulk deals that as property owners and investors, this is something that they can leverage to make their buildings more attractive, especially in a day and age right now where there's more and more development. We're seeing many large developers and small ones transitioning to bulk as a way to leverage this as an amenity to both sustain and increase occupancy rates.
To bulk or not to bulk, that is the question.
In today's ever-changing world of telecommunications, where choice has become the buzzword of the day, homeowners and association leaders are faced with a dilemma. Proposing a switch to a community-wide bulk agreement after residents are used to selecting their television and internet services at retail can be daunting. But when homeowners hear about how much money can be saved and how much their services can be improved, objections seem to disappear.
Is it necessary in today's environment?
Internet access has become the new utility. No longer something simply nice to have, access to fast, reliable internet services has become a necessity. With it has come the demand from residents for service providers to offer the most advanced technology at an affordable price. As a community association manager or board member, it's important to look for a provider who is in it for the long haul and one that can build a solid relationship with your community to understand its unique needs and offer ongoing support and education. The most effective partnerships are with service providers who can elevate your community's technology services by using long-lasting materials, such as fiber optics versus copper cabling, technology that can withstand extreme weather conditions, including hurricanes, and that's capable of receiving periodic upgrades to ensure the network is always operating at optimal performance, able to handle the technology of tomorrow without the hassle of additional construction interruptions today.
What is bulking?
Bulking is an agreement between an HOA and a service provider to deliver specified services, such as internet and television, to everyone in the community. Typically, these services are the same for each household, with an option for residents to add additional services or features at their discretion at a reduced retail rate. A bulk service model is ideal for communities that want to provide their residents with more advanced products and services at a lower cost than traditional retail service providers. Bulking is especially attractive to those residents who understand the power of a consistent, reliable data connection and are interested in saving money for that connection. Once the network is in place, upgrades can be completed seamlessly and remotely, with little to no need for additional construction, which also contributes to the overall cost savings.
What can bulk pricing do for my community?
We can offer advanced, feature-rich services to all residents versus traditional retail services that can vary in pricing, speed, and typically come with a do-it-yourself approach to customer service. By choosing a bulk service provider that provides a main fiber feed to deliver high-speed, symmetrical internet to your community, they are then able to construct individual fiber lines to each household from a centrally located distribution point or head end to bring lightning-fast speeds into every home.
All right, so, I'll touch on basically the benefits of bulk agreements, and one of the things that I want to touch on first and foremost is that bulk agreements aren't just for apartment buildings, right? More and more HOAs, condo communities are now going to these providers and going, hey, you're not in our community yet. We've got 40 homes here, and we would love for you to come into our community, but we would like to discuss having a bulk agreement with you, and this is something that you'll do. And internet service providers are now doing this. The best way to do this, especially when you have a new internet service provider that's coming into your community, that is an excellent time to be able to do that, because they are looking to plant their flag and gain market share. So you can use that to your advantage and come as an HOA or an apartment building, or investors that have apartment buildings that are looking to really leverage that infrastructure to make their property more valuable. So again, right, amenities. So we're seeing many developers across Chittenden County leveraging this as an amenity, and they're not just using internet. They're actually taking the cost of heating, electricity, water, internet, and they're rolling that up into one bill. So now when the tenant moves in, they're paying one rate. And oftentimes they're going to often get way more for that value because they're getting it at a bulk rate. Now, I've already talked a little bit about the enhanced property value. That's really just the value that you're bringing that fiber infrastructure in. Not only attracts high rental rates, right, but overall just higher property values in general. One of the biggest ones that people overlook is the operational efficiency with doing this. So when you have a property, a rental property, and people are moving in and out, every single time they could be choosing different providers. That new provider schedules an installation. That person comes in. They don't know the building. They don't know where the wiring is. So you know what they're going to do? They're going to run the quickest and fastest wiring that they have. Drill holes through the side of the building, run wire, even though it's already been ran before. And if they can't figure out where it goes, they just cut that one and just leave it. And the next thing you know, as a property owner, you have wiring spaghetti all along the side of your building, holes drilled through your floor, window wells. What this allows you to do is it allows you to work with one provider. You have strict regulations into the wiring that they must do and must follow. And it allows them to do all that work up front in one shot. So when they're activating and deactivating, no installation tech has to come. They're just doing this all remote from their building because all of the work has been done up front. So there's a lot of operational efficiency and reduced wear and tear that you can have on your properties by going this route.
So Nick, I'm going to take a guess. You can't bulk services. So my son and I own 7 or 8 properties, and they're not all next to each other. I'm imagining that I can't bulk with different locations.
You absolutely can. Yes.
You can.
Yeah. So yeah, oftentimes what you're going to find is if you go to the ISP, the internet service provider, and you say, listen, I've got 10 properties. I've got 80 units spread out over 10 buildings. What can you do for me if I'm going to give you all of that business? If I roll this up into a bulk agreement, what can you do for me? Multiple providers will offer a solution for that because, again, it's allowing them to gain market share, lock out their competition. So there's a lot of upside. So yes, you definitely can.
A quick question for you. If this is taking you too off track, I can save them to the end. For those property managers who will be reviewing this, and I think we have one on as well, and I'm thinking about my property management company now. Is it possible that if a property management company went out to their clients and said, we have an offer to collaborate in the following areas, that you could create a bulk agreement with a property management company that may actually service several different ownership structures?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it depends on the provider, right? Because again, we have to, from the internet service provider standpoint, what they're going to be looking at is, are we already serving these buildings? If we do, what's our current take rate, right? And they're going to run an analysis to say, okay, if I only have 40% of the building, but I'm getting a much higher rate, I can get 100% of the building. Granted, I've got to charge a little bit less, but the numbers typically still work in their favor, where it's an incentive for them to still do the deal because they're going to do 2 things: 100% of the building, lock out their competition, and there's no churn for them. There's a cost for them to acquire that customer every single month to try to get them. So the fact that they won't have to do that, there's a lot of value for them for that.
Love it.
Interesting. Yep. I could imagine there could be some challenges for a property management company for buildings that they don't own, right? Because owners don't have to stay with that particular property management company, but I'm sure there's ways to work through that.
Yeah, definitely. The property management company can represent the building owner, And typically the contract is with the actual owner of the property. They may have the property management company representing them, but ultimately that agreement is with the building owner, to your point, Angela.
Yep. But would you look, and I know this may be specific to Burlington Telecom, but if you had a property management company that wanted to bulk services and they had 10 different owners, you would do agreements with those 10 different owners, but they could
in a bulk fashion.
They could do the bulk, and you're looking at the whole,
absolutely,
all of the properties from those 10 owners when you're crafting the deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, we personally have actually done that with one particular organization that had, 2 or 3 different owners. They had about 80 units together. We looked at it as all as one. They were all different buildings everywhere. We weren't in any of them. And it was a total win-win. Tenants are happier, right? Because these buildings were not brand new. So, the operator was really faced with the challenge of, how do I make my property more attractive when all of these new buildings are going up around me that are really nice and fancy, right? They're fetching a really high price. So how do I get back in the rental game? So that was one way they were able to do it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Another advantage is just the consistent pricing and service aspect to it too. In those agreements, you can often lock in your pricing so you know exactly what you're going to be paying every month and every year as well. And then you're going to obviously get the reliable, more reliable, fast internet. And that would be one of the big negotiation points. If you're going to do a bulk agreement with a provider, make sure they're bringing in the most relevant infrastructure that they have, right? Because that's the whole point. If you're going to be locked into an agreement, you want to make sure that you're getting good value for your money. Some of the other ones, dedicated IT support and customer service, right? Typically, providers are going to offer a white glove service, meaning that as the building owner, oftentimes the old deals would be, well, if a tenant has a problem, they got to open a ticket with the property manager. Then the property manager has to call the internet service provider. That has all gone away now. Most ISPs are now offering what they call a white glove service, which means you as the investor, if you do a deal with me, it is my job to serve your tenants, which means we have a list of all of your tenants, their numbers, what units they're in. They get internet that you provide and you pay us. If they have a problem with their internet, they can call us directly. We can work with them. The only thing we can't do is change their services without your permission. But it allows you to literally have a turnkey solution you don't even have to worry about. And typically, this is at zero cost to the building owner, because keep in mind, whatever this is costing them, they're recovering on the other end from their tenants. And oftentimes, if you build that into the rent, there's even an opportunity for you actually to build in a little bit of additional revenue. So now not only does it not cost you anything, now this is a revenue source for you. Which obviously I just talked about. And the biggest thing is the churn rate. So we have actually been talking with a lot of our building owners that do the wholesale deals. They've instantly noticed a much lower rate of churn. Now, again, some of that can be contributed to many of the other things that they're doing in their building. But when they have everything rolled into one bill, they've got really good connectivity at a fair price, and it would be much more expensive everywhere else. Obviously, that's a key thing to possibly keep them there. So just some high level of what you would be looking at if you were at a bulk agreement. Most bulk agreements go, ranging between 3 and 10 years. It's really driven, by the individual and their comfort level. The rate per unit is really going to depend on what percentage of the building you're guaranteeing. Now, the great part is that, and I mentioned this earlier, most deals now will only bill you per occupied unit, which means you may offer 100% to the ISP, but it's 100% of occupied units. So if you only have 80% occupancy, you're only getting charged for 80%. Now, the old deals of yesterday with the cable operators, it wasn't like that. They were charging you no matter what, whether that building was empty or not. So that's one advantage nowadays that investors have. Annual increases, those are typically going to range anywhere between 2 and 5%. And the great part is oftentimes you can actually structure those increases to happen on your lease renewal periods. So in Vermont, we know the big lease renewal period is typically June or July, where you can structure that with your ISP and say, okay, every year you can go up 2 to 5%. July 1 when I do all my tenant turnover. So typically, as a new tenant moves in, that new price just becomes the price that they've always known. Lastly, wiring costs can be greatly reduced, right? That's a really big leverage point, I would say. If you know you have a really expensive overhaul that you have to do, leveraging that internet service provider and that bulk agreement, make them do the wiring as part of the deal. It's a win-win. They're going to be able to provide great service, and it's not going to cost you anything to upgrade your building. I'm happy to open it up for questions if you guys have any more questions or thoughts.
One of the questions that comes to mind, and again, if we have any, and Sheila, recognize your eye, I would love to always hear from you. So I'm anticipating that when you work with a property management company or retrofitting existing buildings, is that generally that the landlord's covering the monthly, the internet service provider, or is that a pass-through opportunity to the tenant?
Oh, it's absolutely a pass-through opportunity.
Okay. Interesting.
And oftentimes you're doing one of two things. As the internet service provider is working with the owner of the building. The owner of the building is the one signing the contract, but oftentimes that landlord is now building that cost into the rent or charging them separately. So it is still up to the owner to pay the bill because they're the ones getting billed. But oftentimes they'll structure that right in with their leases, so they're then recovering the cost from the tenants right up front. If that makes sense?
So I think to follow up on what Brian was asking, when you do these bulk deals, the tenant themselves is not setting up an account with the ISP.
I see. I apologize.
Thank you.
It's the account stays with the landlord or the property owner, and they either build it into the rent or have a separate charge in the lease that they're collecting from that tenant. But the landlord themselves is making the payment and has the account with the ISP.
Yeah, so excellent. Sorry about that. So you're absolutely right. So basically what we do is you set up the account for all of the units through the owner, through the LLC. And then what we would do is there's a monthly rent roll or lease schedule that the property management company sends the internet service provider. Here's the name, here's all the unit numbers, here's the names of all of our tenants, here's all the ones that should be active, here's their phone numbers and their email addresses in case you need to contact them or they call in for service. And yes, it is 100% set up through the property owner. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So let's say you do a bulk deal, but you don't choose the highest speed, right? Maybe you don't want to pay for a gig for each one of your units. Maybe you only want to pay for 500 megs. We actually have deals set up where you can offer 500 megs to your tenants. And if the tenants want to upgrade, they can actually call in, set up a separate account, and then they can pay the difference to upgrade. So that is the one instance where they would set up a separate account, the tenant. But it allows you still provide a service, maybe not charge, get charged the highest price or have the best, but still have an option for your tenants to still get that.
This is going to be, you may not be able to answer this question, but what would a typical, cable, user see in a discount for a quality service? You have an idea on a monthly, how does that, I don't even know, I guess, as I'm saying, if you can even answer it, because there's so many.
Yeah, is cable would it be cable or internet that you're interested in?
Cable for internet provider. So an internet provider through, say, Consolidated or Comcast, comparatively to fiber optic with Burlington Telecom.
Yeah, typically through a bulk deal, you can save as anywhere between 40 to 50% off the monthly cost of that service. Now, with TV, it's a little different. Internet is probably the biggest savings, but because the content providers have built in so much legal language into their deals with the cable operators, oftentimes the cable operators don't have a lot of control over the bulk deals of cable, but with internet, it's not regulated. So it's really up to the ISP where they can control that pricing while you're seeing such deep discounts depending on the number of units you have.
Angela, this is a question for you.
Yeah.
But is there a legal issue if I say on one of my 4 units, the internet provider is Burlington Telecom? That's it.
Well, I think the way that's structured with a bulk deal, you're paying for that. You may have put it into the rent, but the tenant, it would be no different than, you're getting electricity from Green Mountain Power. Like I think you would have a harder time if you said, tenant, you have to set up your own account. Your only option is to use this company. But the way these bulk deals are structured, because the landlord, the property owner has the account, it's then treated more as an amenity. We provide internet for you. It's included in your rent.
Exactly. Now, there is some very specific language that can't be used in these agreements, like exclusivity, right? So what you can't tell a tenant is, here, this is BT provided in your rent, and you're not allowed to choose anyone else, right? You can still choose that other provider, but again, as Angela said, BT's included in your rent, you're getting billed for it. So most people are not going to go out and choose another provider on top of that, knowing they're already getting billed for that service.
Excellent. No, this has been very eye-opening to me, and it gives me a variety of different ways that property management companies and or landlords like myself, which I wear both hats, can provide value not only to their clients but potentially our renting residents, who we obviously value and wish to earn the right to retain them.
Yeah. As a property owner myself and landlord, I couldn't agree more with you.
Right. And I think it's, to some extent, it's a testament of what we're seeing in the shift of how people consume internet, right? So many things have gone to streaming services. Traditional cable is not as utilized versus like Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all of the other ones that I don't even know about because there's so many out there. And all of that takes bandwidth. And I think, the other thing, if people aren't familiar with fiber, you don't share that connection with anybody else. Even if the whole building's wired the same, it's not like cable where you're sharing that line with everybody else who's on it. So your speeds, upload and download speeds aren't actually impacted by usage of others around you.
It's pretty cool. We refer to it as in people on cable or DSL, everyone's drinking from the same well, right? And when everyone's drinking from the same well, that's why you see those peak time slowdowns. And the reason why fiber is so unique is that, everybody's got their own well, and the habits of the neighbors have zero impact on them, which adds a real benefit.
Right. Yeah. And same with weather. You don't see the weather impacts on the fiber cable like you do coax. Like if the wind blows too hard at my house, like my internet might go out.
And that's the degradation of copper, right? It's just because of electromagnetic, right? And inclement weather, they do not mix well. Right. And over time, it just becomes more and more volatile.
How is it with lightning? Because I feel like if lightning strikes too close to my house occasionally, my internet goes out too.
Wind, lightning, rain, cold. It's it's definitely unfortunate.
So I know one of the things I learned was the 8.5 average devices connected, which seems ridiculously low considering my house. I've got smokers connected to Wi-Fi, the oven. I don't think the fridge is, but it can be to to hue lighting. Yeah, so I would be surprised.
The 8.5
to like 20 in the next few years.
Oh yeah, well 8.5 was 2019 pre-pandemic, and it exploded through the pandemic. But I was 2025 they're saying about 14.5. But you're right, I count a dozen in my home with 3 people, like easily. No problem, right?
Yeah,
just cell phones and laptops.
Devices. I mean, I bought a new air conditioner this year, and it's connected with Wi-Fi. I can turn it on and off on an app on my phone, or adjust the temperature. Even just normal devices or things that you wouldn't have thought are connected to the internet 5 or 6 years ago are now all using the internet.
100% right. 100%
Nick, this has been very, very helpful. I am going to reach out both with a couple of properties I have in mind myself, as well as my house as well, based upon today's. I also love the fact that you're, for lack of a better phrase, a local. I was about to say startup. Maybe you're past the startup phase.
Sure.
But I'd love to see. I think competition is great for all of our industries.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway that we want is, regardless of whether you choose to use our services or another providers, our goal is just to go out there and educate developers, property owners, other ISPs on just leveraging proper wiring techniques, setting your properties up for the future. And the more we can get out there and touch developers and really set themselves up for success in the future, I think everybody's going to be better off.
Excellent.
Exactly. And I think, to reiterate, if folks have stayed this long listening to the video, if you're interested with Burlington Telecom, they have expanded their network. They are not just in Burlington any longer. And probably the best way is to get on their website and take a look at their coverage map, because it is expanding all the time. And they're building out into Chittenden County and are in a number of areas that historically they have not been in. So.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. Yes, yeah, we're really excited. If anyone has any questions, we would love for you to reach us on the website. You can reach out to me at any time as well.
Yep.
Excellent.
And I think, before we sign off here, I have a couple reminders for folks. One is don't forget about the flood disclosure form. So that is now required at lease signing time. That went into effect July 1st. The state finally released its form in September. So that is available, needs to be used. The other announcement I have is, if you are an LLC or a corporation, if you have not filed your beneficial owner information with the feds, you have the grace period for that ends at the end of this year. So make sure you get those beneficial owner forms in and do those filings as well. So
excellent. Well, we look forward to their next session. Nick, thank you very much. I grew out of this, and it's definitely changing my perspective about the value of competing ISPs and revisiting, hopefully work with your organization. Angela and I will actually be sending probably some updates out. We're talking about potentially a year-end review of everything that's happened in the legislature or not. Angela, I also might I don't know if you can pull, what's the year-over-year eviction cases up, down. Love to hear a little bit about that. And I'd love to share what we're seeing happening on the brokerage side of inventory of sales, which I think is going to be another interesting, year, at least another interesting couple of months with everything that's happening in Washington.
Yeah, I think we'll be doing that in December. And I just received some confirmation. It looks like Efficiency Vermont can join us in November. So we'll be having a seminar with them in November. So stay tuned for that. That could also be super interesting with lots of information.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for watching today. Again, Brian Armstrong with Keller Williams Vermont, Strongwell Property Management. Angela Zakowski fighting the fight in Montpelier to protect our property rights as well as create fair housing in our community. And Nick, thank you very much for bringing your information today. I look forward to the opportunity to grow with you.
All right.
Thank you both for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Take care, folks. Enjoy.
Bye.